Hey, what's up? Richard Bryce here. Today, I want to quickly talk about when to use an open stance and when to use a neutral stance forehand, because it's something that I see a lot of players getting wrong. They're basically not setting up in the right position based on the type of ball that they're receiving, and it causes a lot of problems, and it causes them to tweak and tinker with things that maybe they don't need to address because the issue is the type of stance they're using. So I'm going to break them down and kind of give you some simple things that you can work on. I hope you find this video helpful. If you do, it'd be awesome if you can give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Okay, so the most simple way to think about this is you're going to be using a neutral stance when you've got more time and when the ball is lower. And you're going to be using an open stance when you've got less time and the ball is higher. This is why when you watch professional tennis players play, they hit 70–80% of their shots from either an open stance or a semi-open stance, because their opponent is hitting the ball so hard, and generally there's a lot of topspin, so the ball is coming quickly, there's less time, and the ball is kicking up, so they're using a lot of different variations of the open stance because that's what's required. When you've got more time, biomechanically it's a little bit easier to step in and hit with a neutral stance. So when we've got more time, so maybe you're playing against your opponent, they just give you a shorter ball and you've got time to step in and hit it that way, then you'll use a neutral stance. But you also want to factor in the height. It is really hard to hit a neutral stance up there. It can be done. Again, if you watch the best players in the world play, they can make anything work. But for most of us, we want to be thinking about hitting a neutral stance from waist height and below. So sometimes that means you've got to move forwards or back, which is why it's important that you've got time. So if your opponent gives you a short ball, potentially you're stepping in and hitting from a neutral stance. Or if your opponent hits it deep and it's a little bit more floaty, you can get back. You've got time to then step in and still hit with a neutral stance. So they're going to be the general times where you're going to be doing this at the baseline. And then, like we said at the start, we're going to be hitting an open stance where we've got less time. So if your opponent is hitting it harder, you're going to be moving out in an open stance and hitting from there. Generally, you're going to be thinking from waist height and above. Now, obviously, I'm making generalizations because if your opponent hits it really low and hard, and this is again something you see a lot in the professional game, they'll be hitting an open stance from very low. And you see some of the flexible female players, they're staying right down and hitting it from that sort of position. If you're flexible enough to be able to do it and your opponent's hitting it hard enough for you to warrant doing it, then yeah, you can then use that open stance from the lower ball. But generally, you want to think open stance from waist height up to shoulder height and above. You're going to be setting up in that open stance. We also need to consider when we're moving forwards. So if we get a short ball and we're coming in, that's where we're going to apply the height of the ball as a factor. So if your opponent hits a short ball and the ball is low, you're going to be hitting from a neutral stance and generally using a hop step. So coming in and doing the hop step. You could potentially pivot through, but you'll be hitting that lower ball as you move forwards from this neutral stance. If you've got a short ball and the short ball is higher, that's when you're going to come in. You're going to set up either in an open stance or you're going to set up in a semi-open stance to hit it. So that's why I say the simple way to think about it is when we've got time and or when it's lower, neutral stance. When we've got less time and or higher, we're going to be hitting from a variation of an open stance. So this is just stuff you have to think about when you're on court. You have to really kind of focus on where the ball's going to go. As soon as you've predicted where it's going to go, set up in position, and you're going to have to think about this consciously for a while until it becomes automated. Now, something that comes along with that is how well your visual system is functioning. One of the keys to higher level tennis is to very quickly read where the ball's going so you can set up in a better position every time and then hit a better quality of shot. In order to do that, your visual system has to be functioning at a really high level, and the reality is that a lot of adult tennis players' visual systems don't function well enough for them to be able to predict where the ball's going quickly enough. The good news though is that you can actually train your vision with really simple drills, and I've created a free tennis vision starter program to help you with it. I'll place a link up there, and there'll also be a link down the description to get hold of that. And you want to start working on that, spend about 5 minutes a day training your visual system, and by training your visual system and kind of focusing on this stuff on court, Then you'll start to set up in better positions, and it's going to improve the quality of forehand that you can hit, really bring down the number of errors that you make. Okay, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, be awesome if you give me a thumbs up. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them down below and I'll get back to you as quick as I can.